to Podtoid. I'm CJ.
I'm Charlotte.
I'm Occams.
And this is episode 452. Thank you for joining us today. On the show, we're going to be talking about some Ghost of Tsushima, some Void Terrarium, and Assassin's Creed Syndicate. And a little bit later, we'll be looking at the Xbox Game Showcase. But unfortunately, we're gonna have to do that with just the three of us because Chris and Dan are out this week. CJ, Occams, and Charlotte, I don't think we've done this combination before.
I think it's the best combination.
Easily.
It probably will end up being that way. Let's just be honest right now. And I say that knowing that Chris will listen to every word of this podcast when he gets back from the hospital. And yeah.
What? Sorry, I've been out of the loop. Chris is in the hospital.
Oh, he's getting some tests done. Nothing serious.
Bear attacked him too. Don't forget the bear attack.
Those British bears, yes.
Yeah.
Are there bears in Britain?
There are if you go to the right club.
Yeah. Okay. I try and start this show off on a lighthearted note to get us into the mood, but this past week has been anything but lighthearted, especially with all of the news coming out of Ubisoft. There was headlines a little more than a week ago talking about the sexual harassment that's taken place at some of its development studios. We got more news this past week. Just plain awful behavior coming from some of the higher ups of Ubisoft, including one guy, I believe his name is Serge Haskowitz. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. But he was featured prominently in a Bloomberg article that was written by Jason Schreier back on Monday. And we found out that, in addition to just the toxic workplace that he enabled to develop under him, he is someone who would bang his head on a table if he ever got bored during a meeting, which sounds like a toddler.
Now, to be fair, when I was in college and I was trying to do a perfect run in Tony Hawk 3, and I'd mess up the run, it was on the cruise ship level, my favorite level. Okay. And when I'd mess up the run, I would get angry and put the controller down, and I would headbutt a door that was near where I was sitting. So, I mean, really, it's the same thing.
Except you weren't doing that in a meeting at a workplace.
No, it was a newborn ward in a hospital, though.
Okay, yeah, that's a more appropriate place to do it.
Mm-hmm.
We also found out he would hold meetings at strip clubs, which is a totally not creepy thing to do.
That's so fucking cheesy. Oh my god.
I mean, the thing is, the banging your head on like a table during a board meeting, I can imagine that happening at like Deutsche Bank as well, and places, like investment banking companies, you can imagine that happening. But holding meetings in a strip club is it's like somebody tried to write a film about, Wall Street 20 years, 30 years later. Like that's sounds made up.
Well, actually, I have it written down here because we also got word on Friday that more stories were coming out about executives, and including one who said, who apparently went to a morning breakfast meeting while on a business trip and told everyone he had spent the night masturbating. If your conduct sounds like it's the actions from the brokerage firm in The Wolf of Wall Street, you're probably not a good company.
Like the whole night?
Apparently so.
Oh. Jesus, hope he had some good lotion.
I think you'd be too exhausted for breakfast.
Yeah, really.
So of course, when you run a company like that, that kind of attitude is going to find its way into the games you sell. And the Bloomberg report exposed details on Surge that also pointed to Ubisoft's reluctance to have women as the main protagonist of games, with Surge and Ubisoft marketing telling development teams that female protagonists do not sell. And this was happening as the development teams behind the Assassin's Creed series tried to get more women to star in their games. Attempts were made with Assassin's Creed Syndicate, Origins, and Odyssey, but instead the teams were forced to settle on having a prominently male protagonist or male and female options, which I've seen people say is good for like the consumer, so you get to choose who you want to be. But coming from a writer's point of view, that sucks. That sucks to have to try and create two perfectly well-rounded protagonist characters for people to choose from, when really, looking at Odyssey, only one of them was well-rounded, and it wasn't the guy.
All right, here I have a solution for that.
Okay.
Okay, so you give them a choice. but you actually put your writing team on the female protagonist. Let them write the story they want to write for her. Badass. For the male protagonist, every bit of dialogue is just sound clips of grunts from Home Improvement.
That reference is going to be nothing to so much of our audience.
100%.
If I can just have a bit of a rant about that, it's like,
yeah, go ahead.
Those of us who are so female players who have been playing games like me since the 90s, possibly earlier, who have played as male protagonists constantly. And for me personally, I don't even think about it. I'm just like, this is the person I'm playing as. I'm imagining I'm playing as this person. It doesn't really matter what gender the character is. It's like, I don't understand this argument anymore that men don't want to play as women. And it's been proved time and time again that men do want to play as women quite a lot. Like, not all the time, but it's like as women, we've had to get used to playing as men. I don't see why the other way around. For the vast majority of men, I think, are okay with it. And it's been proved again, like I've said time and time again, with The Last of Us Part 2, with Odyssey, how many people want to play as Cassandra. Syndicate, I mean, I think Syndicate got less glowing reviews, but I definitely want to play as Evie more than I do as that other bloke. So it's just like, it's such a stupid opinion to have. I'm sorry, I know opinions are not facts, but it's so stupid. It doesn't make any sense.
I agree, and I'm kind of trying to figure out how Ubisoft came to this conclusion outside of anything other than sexism, because it's not like they have a long history of trying to promote female-led games within their company. I decided to look into it to see how they could have possibly come to this conclusion that women don't sell games by looking at their history to see how many games with female protagonists they've released, solely female protagonists that they've released, and we're excluding stuff like Just Dance or like U-Shape or any of their workout games. And these are the ones I found. Ubisoft developed games that feature women as a sole protagonist. Tomb Raider: The Prophecy for the Game Boy Advance. I don't remember that game either. Beyond Good and Evil, which Ubisoft decided to release within days of its own Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. You know, one of the most influential games of that console generation. Sabrina the Teenage Witch: Potion Commotion for the Game Boy Advance. Star Wars Lethal Alliance for the PSP and DS. Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation for the Vita, and Assassin's Creed Chronicles China. That was part of that side-scrolling Assassin's Creed Chronicles trio of games. So, are any of those... I mean, besides Beyond Good and Evil, which I think everyone can agree was vastly overlooked when it came out and did not become the hit it should have become, it doesn't really seem like Ubisoft has even made an effort to make female-led games. And this is looking at 20 years of their history.
I mean, they've done it kind of by accident in the sense that they've had some very strong side characters who were female. Like, I can't remember any of the names of any of the characters in this game because I last played it and finished it 3 years ago. But the female side character in Watch Dogs 2 was a pretty strong character and probably one of the most fleshed, like, sort of believable characters out of all of them. She was the least like a caricature. So they could do it if they wanted to, and it seems like maybe they have people on their teams who are writing strong female characters because they want to kick up against this without having to do something to keep the board happy, but behind the scenes do something a bit more progressive, if you know what I mean. So yeah.
You know, I've been playing video games for 30 years, and a majority of my time is spent playing single-player games has been as white dudes. When I play multiplayer, like any fighting game, I immediately try out the women before I try out the men. Not because, I'm trying to be woke or whatever. It's because they always are faster on the movement and thus play into my fighting game style more than any other character. So this isn't just me looking to get more women as protagonists or even more black people as protagonists, which I think we could use as well. This is just me looking at games like Crossfire X and thinking, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to play this game where I play some random white guy with a scruffy an unshaven face who goes into combat. I'm done. Give me something different. Give me something new.
The thing that amazed me when I read the article in Destructoid talking about how they said women don't sell games, and the comment that I loved actually, because my very first thought was like, this sounds like dialogue from like The Bad Guys in like an 80s or 90s kind of like kids movie almost. I mean, just it was like you could take the boardroom scenes in No Holds Barred. And I know I'm leaving like half the audience. I get it. But like the dialogue that they had for that was the exact same thing they're doing, but in real life. It astounds me that they just would just ignore, I don't know, reality, common sense, and just the only thing I can think is that they've made a lot of money. They've made these games. They have a formula, and it works for them. And like so many institutions, they will have to be dragged kicking and screaming into the present to really do anything substantially different than what they're doing now, which is really unfortunate because I'm right there with you, CJ. I get tired of playing like just white dudes. And in my fighting games, actually, I go for all the monster characters first. That's always been my bag. Big giant things with like hammer hands. Yeah, I'm gonna try those out. But yeah, it'd be nice to play as someone different, have a different perspective, which would be really good, especially as I get older. I'm like you, I've been gaming for over 30 years, and I don't need to be another like white dude. I don't want to just be play when I play a shooter. I don't need to just like shoot stuff. That's fine. That's great. But it would be nice to like have a different perspective, to get something a little bit deeper than just go shoot stuff, or even an RPG where you're just like I'm Steve the stable boy, but really I'm Steve the prophesized hero. And okay, just something a little different, something a little more unique to broaden my horizons. Because when you've been gaming as long as we have, you see the patterns repeat, and it gets really old really fast.
This is Podtoid.
Let's go ahead and get talking about games. And Occams, we're going to start with you. Very excited to hear your thoughts on Ghost of Tsushima.
It's an interesting experience. I have been playing it for a few days now, and I love it. I really do. And it's the level of detail that they've gone into. It feels like you're playing a samurai movie, a samurai film, in the best way possible. And what's really interesting to me is I'm playing this and I'm thinking like, okay, well this is like, and I made this comment when the game was kind of, the previews were coming out and stuff, of how it seems to be like a greatest hits for like games like Assassin's Creed or Far Cry, where you have the open world map, you go, there's an objective or a little icon, you collect stuff, you do stuff, and like those games typically bore me. I get tired, I get burned out really quick because they're just not very interesting to me. But this one kind of has me hooked, and I think a lot of it has to do with the way the story I like a lot. The acting in it is really, really good. I'm playing. I don't know, like they have English dub, and I'm the kind of person who, at least with anime, I always watch the English dub because I don't feel like reading it. But for foreign films, you have to have the original voices. So I kind of want to put on the English dub just to hear like, look here, you. I don't know why it's John Wayne, but in my head it's John Wayne. But it's so well done, and it makes me want to go watch old Akira Kurosawa films. It makes me want to dive into my like Seijun Suzuki box set, and I'm just name dropping now, but it just makes me want to go like explore more Asian cinema. And the combat is wonderful. Oh, the combat is so much fun. There's this thing called a standoff. Like you approach a group of dudes and you're like, hey, you guys are assholes. Come fight me. And it's like the classic thing to where you're just like, you have your sword and someone runs at you, and right before they get you, you like flash the blade, you cut them in half. It's awesome. But there's just little moments. It's so much fun. I love combat. And another thing I really love about the game, it doesn't penalize you for being stealthy like an assassin. It's mentioned how you're a samurai and there's like this honor and you're not supposed to fight like that. But it's also made painfully clear in the beginning of the game, like shit's got to change because the Mongols are here and they're not playing by the rules. So you really can't. Your old honor code system, that's great and all, but it's really difficult to keep that up and deal with like 60 dudes in a base camp. But the game doesn't penalize you for it the way like a Dishonored or something did. And it's just such a good game. If I had one complaint, so there's there are different stances for your sword. There's like wind, Water, Stone, Fire, Earth, Captain Planet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and each one is sort of lends itself to fighting different types of enemies. A guy with a sword, guy with a sword and a shield, a spear guy, whatever. And I just don't care. Like, I don't want to have to switch between them because the combat gets really, really kind of hectic in a fun way. Because you've got your bow, you've got you can throw out stuff like kunai, which are like throwing knives, or sticky bombs. You get your sword thing, but like the combat stances, I don't find particularly engaging. So I just kind of stick with the first one because it looks the coolest to me. But it's a beautiful game. The photo mode is wonderful. Oh, I love when games do this, and it's really easy. All you have to do for the photo mode is just you hit the right on the directional pad, and just boom, you're in photo mode. So and I'm talking in the middle of combat, and everything freezes. It's a bunch of options. It's a photographer's dream to or I guess a cinematographer's dream. It's wonderful. It's a great game. I think if you even have an inkling of liking samurai movies or Japanese film, play it. Well worth your time. It's wonderful, and I'm really happy. It's a hell of I played Last of Us 2 and now this, and it's just one hell of a 1-2 punch to go out for the PS4.
Nice. Now I have to ask, one of the biggest complaints I've heard about Ghost of Tsushima is its camera is awful. Have you had troubles with the camera?
A little. It's not okay. So what happens is, and this is kind of tale as old as time when it comes to cameras and these kind of games. If you're fighting in the woods or near a building, sometimes they'll get caught on something, or it'll sort of float around a little bit. But it's few and far between for me, and it helps that a lot of the combat I've encountered happens open fields and different areas. But no, a couple times it's been in the gotten in the way more than it's helped. But it hasn't been a huge issue to me, at least.
Okay. And you said you're listening to this on the Japanese dub with American subtitles? Or
yes.
English subtitles? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you know that's not the original way it was recorded, right?
Interesting. What was the original way it was recorded?
Well, in English. Because if you look at it, all the mouths match up perfect to the English versus the Japanese.
Really?
So they didn't go back and do the facial capture for the Japanese voice track.
Oh, I didn't. I did not know that. That's fun. Yeah, well, I'll give the English dub a try at some point. But it's the voice acting for the Japanese voices is fantastic, and there's a lot of oomph there. There's a lot of they convey a lot of emotion. For me, not speaking the language, I certainly can tell what they're saying even without reading the subtitles.
Nice. I always like when foreign performances get rave reviews in video games because very rarely does that happen. Yeah. Very rarely do we focus on Japanese or, these 7 different languages they release in Europe versus, all the praise we always throw on American voice actors. So
absolutely, we got to give some shout out to the Portuguese voice recordings at some point.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and move on to me. I have been playing Void Terrarium, which is a most recent release from NIS America. It's a mishmash of genres that it combines mystery dungeon crawling with crafting, decorating, and a Tamagotchi-like pet, except the pet is a human. In fact, she's the last human on the planet. You play as this robot who makes friends with an operating system that, in a fit of rage, pulled a bender and killed all humans, except for this one little girl with a fungus growing out of her head. And so the basic premise of the game is you have to try and keep this girl alive and happy. And you do this by feeding her and cleaning her terrarium and crafting new items to decorate it with. And to get all these supplies, you have to go into mystery dungeons, these randomly generated dungeons, defeat enemies and collect supplies. And everything you collect is turned into resources at the end of your dungeon run. And I have to say, in the early hours of Void Terrarium, it is one of the harshest roguelikes I have ever played. This is one of my favorite genres of games, and usually they are, the newer ones especially are built with a progression system in mind so that, if you fail, you go back to the start, but it doesn't necessarily kind of fuck you over. Or they're made a bit easier, like with the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, and your progression is just tied to the story. Here, your progression is just tied to your ability to get materials. And I've had several dungeon runs that end on the very first floor just because the variety and the amount of enemies they throw at me make it impossible for me to survive. I had one run where I died in the room I started in because they put me right next to a siren that when I touched it brought 5 enemies right next to me who took turns beating the shit out of me until I died. Like that was the entirety of my run right there. It can be super defeating, but the more you play, the more resources you get and the more items you can craft. And when you craft items, you get boosts that raise your base level stats before you go into each dungeon. Because you start each dungeon run at level 1, like with most mystery dungeon games. But if you keep crafting new materials, you can get increased health, increased attack power, starting moves that you don't usually have or you haven't had before. You get all these advantages, and so it kind of pays to go through and just be defeated. Go through a dungeon run until you die, get sent back to the starting area, and craft some stuff for the girl that then helps you out for your next dungeon run. So it's certainly a very different setup than most of the mystery dungeon games and roguelikes that I'm used to. And I didn't like it at first, but now I'm really coming around on it because I'm getting really good at it. So I'm finally seeing what they're going for here. And despite the setting and tone, it's actually a hopeful game. I should have my review for it up this week, but if you like mystery dungeon games, probably keep an eye out for this one. Maybe when it goes on sale. It's an interesting experiment and one of the better games NIS has put out in the past couple of years. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap this up with Charlotte. Charlotte, you've been diving into Syndicate. This is the one that came out after Assassin's Creed Unity, right?
I'm not quite sure off the top of my head, I'm afraid. I know it's early PS4, Xbox One generation.
Okay.
Yeah, I've also been playing Odyssey, so maybe I can just talk a little bit about both. I wasn't going to talk about Odyssey, but I've actually got further than I thought I was going to. So Syndicate is a game that I got for Christmas a couple of years ago, and it just took me a while to get around to properly trying it again for some reason. And I think me trying it again this week has sort of confirmed why I dropped it in the first place. So it's set in Victorian England, and it's split between two, I think they're twins, not just brother and sister, who are like sort of petty thieves, but also sort of, assassins. And yeah, it's set in, you meet Charles Dickens, and I've already met Alexander Graham Bell, and it's set in London, and everything's, how you'd imagine it to be, but it somehow still just feels pretty empty. And I think it might not be its fault. I think it might be because of its era, but it just doesn't feel fully open world in a way. It's like there are like different quests scattered around, but they don't feel very substantial. They feel kind of, you go to a place, you do something fairly straightforward, and it's done. And the environments just don't really feel, it's hard to describe that they're good, but they're not quite as good as I kind of want them to be. And it's a little bit of a disappointment because with Assassin's Creed games, I tend to pick them based on whether I'm interested in the historical era they're based on or not. And I'm really interested in Victorian England. So this was why I was going to give it a try, even though I've heard from a lot of people that they didn't like Syndicate. And so it's a bit of a shame, really. But I think I'm still going to continue with it and give it more of a chance. But I also get the impression that the earlier games, so particularly the Ezio Auditore games, they're a bit more forgiving if you get caught. Whereas I feel like in Syndicate, I've been just murdered so many times because I've accidentally got spotted once and I've not been able to get away on time. So that's a little bit frustrating. Because I do like my stealth games to be a bit more forgiving. Like, I'm not usually a stealth game person. It's just with Assassin's Creed, I can kind of look past it. And there's enough stuff to mean that I don't have to be the perfect stealth player to survive. So when it's not like that, I kind of not as keen on it. Also, I tend to avoid the Assassin's Creeds that have a lot of boat stuff in them because I'm not so keen on the boat stuff, to be honest. Yeah, I'm playing Odyssey now as well. That's a lot better, a lot more immersive, and I'm interested in ancient Greece as well, so that's right up my alley. I guess one of the problems I'm having at the moment with Odyssey is that the map doesn't work very well. Like, I'll hop on my horse and I'll get an icon to go straight to the thing I've marked on my map, and it'll go straight past it. And I've had this happen multiple times. So it's kind of like, it's okay if they want me to make my way to the marker, but they can't like mix and match the signals they're sending, because I'm like using their system to take me to the quest and I'm going somewhere else, which is not okay. But
seems like a time waster right there.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if I don't understand the system properly, or if I'm experiencing bugs or something. But it's like it'll flash up, go to map marker, and I'll press the button to go to the map marker, and I'll go somewhere else. It's like, if that function wasn't in there, I wouldn't complain. But it's in there, so I expect it to work properly. But yeah, the story itself is pretty immersive. I'm interested in how the diverging. So you get to pick a lot of your dialogue in Odyssey, which I've not experienced before. I don't know if the one set in Egypt that was just before Odyssey, whether that had that system. But that's kind of a new thing. So that's kind of interesting. I'm wondering how far the fact that I've kind of like tried to be a good person, but also I'm stealing everything that's not nailed down. So I'm going to see how that pans out. But yeah.
The Elder Scrolls way right there.
In Elder Scrolls, I had a house and I filled a fire pit with skulls. I love that so much. I must have had 100 skulls in that fire pit. It was a good time.
It's a big fire pit.
Yeah,
Unless they were cat skulls.
I mean, some were.
How is, Charlotte, for Odyssey, how has the leveling up been for you? Do you find it to be too slow?
It is a bit slow. I am playing it on easy, though, so that's probably going to make any of what I say less relevant to a lot of players, because I presume most people will play it on normal. It's slow, but I think the thing is it pushes you to do a lot of side quests. Like, it does mark things as main quests, but if you don't do the side stuff, then you're going to struggle at the beginning. But I'm totally fine with that, because all the side quests are pretty interesting and I want to do them. So, but later on, if I start getting side quests that I can't actually do, I guess that could then become a problem. We'll have to see. But yeah, I had to. My first mercenary was way like I could not catch up to him. The way I had to defeat him was to bash at him, run away so that my health regenerated, then come back and start the fight again, which I don't think you're supposed to do, but I had to sort of cheese it a bit to win. But I think, if the leveling is going to be slow, then you use whatever tools you have at your disposal, and running away from a fight to regenerate your health, I think, is a fair enough strategy.
Absolutely. If it works, it works.
You are listening to Podtoid.
All right, that is it for games, which means it is time for the news.
This is the news.
There we go. Obviously, the big story out of this week is that the E3 replacement streams are finally done. Oh, thank God those are over. It has been the most miserable 2 months having to cover every stream, large and small, all adding up to what would have been a pretty mediocre E3 if we had actually had it. If not too many huge major surprises or announcements that we've had this over the past 2 months, but the streams came to an end on Thursday with the Xbox Game Showcase, which was an hour-long look at everything coming to Xbox One and Xbox Series X later this year and beyond. The big draw of the show was we'd finally get to see some Halo Infinite footage, and I have to say, watching that footage really reminded me of playing the original Halo Combat Evolved, not just because the gameplay looked very similar to 20 years ago, but so did the graphics. Bazinga. Obviously, there were way too many games on the show to talk about them all, so I just wanted to hear your thoughts on the broadcast, what you liked and maybe didn't like, and we'll go ahead and start with you, Occams.
Yeah, I have a PlayStation 4, and I'm firmly in the corner of PlayStation right now. I was Xbox 360 last generation, but my thing is I go where the games are. And for this generation, for me, it was games like Last of Us, God of War, Ghost of Tsushima now. And I always go into these conferences looking for the games. What's the thing that's going to make my jaw drop, that's going to make me obsess over it and wonder about it and count the days till it's released? And frankly, I didn't get that from either the Sony's or Microsoft's conference. The Halo one looked good. So like in the sense of, because I'm of an age to where we spent a lot of time in college with the 4 TVs set up in someone's apartments playing Halo instead of doing things like studying or sleeping or showering or the things you should be doing. And so that was fun. But it looked all right. We'll see. I mean, it's always sad to me when I think about Halo and kind of what it's become. It's a lot of every time I talk about Halo or hear someone mention it, it's this kind of same conversation of remember when, rather than oh man, Halo right now it's great. No, it's kind of a used to be thing. So that I'm very hopeful that it can bring Halo back to the forefront of what it used to be.
I will say I keep reading that Infinite is like a reboot of the series. I haven't played any Halo since the first one, but I know a lot of people say that Halo 4 and 5 were not memorable experiences at all. And so, I know there's been a lot of complaints about how Halo 4 or 3 or Rogue or OTS, whatever they are, all look better. They all have more grit and grime on the guns and more detail and stuff like that. I'm just looking at this footage, and it really reminds me of that original Xbox game, just kind of the clean lines and pristine nature of everything. That looks like Halo to me versus something that we've seen more of what we've seen recently, which is just increased hardware power allows us to make dirtier looking games, and so we're going to do that. So yeah, if that's what this is, if this is kind of a reboot looking back, then I'm excited. I'm interested.
Yeah, definitely. I also, if you haven't played any since the first one, Halo ODST was a surprisingly fun game. Good soundtrack too. A lot of like somber piano, which I thought was a nice kind of juxtaposition versus space war.
Yeah.
And then they announced a new Fable game, but what do they show? They just showed a trailer where the very happy Pixie was murdered in front of us. So
that
might
as well just been a logo. Logo reveal.
Yeah, and I like those little they give you like the feeling of a game kind of trailers. They're fun to watch, but they mean nothing at the end of the day. Yeah. And I love the Fable series. I hopefully this will be a generation of people who kind of rediscover the Fable series, because I think there's a lot of kids out there who haven't played it, and they're fun games and they're quirky and I like them. But show me a game footage, man. I can only watch a pixie get murdered so much before I have to masturbate. But no, it's just what it is what it is. And other than that, I can't remember anything else they showed. Those were the two things for me.
All right. Charlotte, do you have anything from that that kind of spoke to you?
I didn't watch the video, but I've sort of read up on afterwards what was talked about, because the thing is with Xbox, so I had a conversation like 2 days ago about whether we should finally, like me and my boyfriend, whether we should go in together to get a Xbox One. And we were just like, even though it's like 150 euros by this point, if that, in Germany, it's like, what are we going to use it for? Like, I want it for rare replay and that's it. And like, is it even then, is it worth it? And it's like, maybe not. So I've just sort of read up a little bit, and the things that speak to me, I mean, it's a lot of what I would expect and why I wasn't really interested in the first place, which is like lots of greens, lots of grays, lots of, Halo is not my thing. Forza is not my thing. Fable is kind of not my thing. First person shooters, blah, 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 blah. But there is a couple of things. So I'm really excited personally for Tell Me Why. Because I like Life is Strange. And I think it's, I don't feel like they've done anything wrong what I've played so far. I've enjoyed everything that I've played from Don't Nod. I mean, the Captain Spirit short game was a real gut punch, but it was a good game. So that's going to be something I'm excited for. Psychonauts 2, I mean, I've played a bit of the first one and I want to play it, and I would love to get into it through Psychonauts 2, so that's pretty exciting. And what was the other thing I was going to talk about? Hello Neighbor 2, because I really want to play the first one. I've just never got round to it again. Because the idea of a stealth horror game that's not actually massive, sink babies and
right.
It's a stealth horror game, but it's kind of not extremely gory and 18 rated, if you know what I mean. So that kind of intrigues me. So.
The Sink Babies is the name of my punk band, by the way.
Can't wait to see them in concert next year.
Yeah. And also, sorry. The thing is, the big ticket items at the moment are things like they've also optimized Sea of Thieves, and as I've just said, I'm not interested in seafaring stuff. For some reason, seafaring games are just a complete turn off for me, and I don't even know why. And for that reason as well, Valhalla's probably going to be one that I miss.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of it's just most of Xbox's output and the games that's going to be on their system are just not for me. I mean, and the one thing that's good though is that of course Yakuza Like a Dragon is going to come to PS5 or PS4 as well. It's already on PS4 in Japan. So, I'm going to get it, even if I don't have an Xbox. But I'm glad that people who are Xbox gamers get to play that game on launch day. That's pretty cool. So it's not for me, but it's nice to hear,
It has been interesting watching Microsoft kind of reignite its attempts to get more Japanese games onto its console, because they did a lot of work during the Xbox 360 era, and it didn't really pay off. No one in Japan bought an Xbox 360. No one in Japan bought an Xbox One. So they kind of just gave up on it. But then in the last year or so, we have Phantasy Star Online as Online 2 exclusive on Xbox. We have the Yakuza game coming there as a console launch. They're getting their first Dragon Quest game ever this December. So it's interesting to see as we go into this next generation that there is a little bit of a attempt to establish itself as a place to play Japanese developed games. And if we remember, the first showcase of Xbox games Xbox Series X games had more Japanese titles, like Bandai Namco was part of that with their new title. So yeah, that's been interesting to me, and that new Yakuza game does look very fun. Looks very fun.
I love that it's turn-based. I love that they just went batshit crazy and made it turn-based. That's so much fun to me.
I love when developers take chances like that. It's like, everyone loves our combat system. Let's throw it out the window.
Yeah.
Do something else.
I mean, there's 19 Yakuza games, and they're very fun, but it's nice to vary it up a little bit. It's
not really come as a surprise that they do something that radical, though, because it must have been a bit shocking when they started, releasing games where Kiryu wasn't the, single main character, but you were playing as random weirdos who you'd never met before. So I think they've done some pretty risky stuff during the series, and I think it's just a continuation of that, and I think it's going to pay off. And from what I've heard, knowing people in my circle who are massive Yakuza fans, like Yakuza speedrunners, they're hyped for it. They don't care that Kiryu is, not the main character. They don't care about all the changes. They just want to see something new, and they welcome something new, so that's cool.
For me, there were 3 games that stuck out in good ways. The games that stuck out in bad ways were Crossfire X and the Fable announcement, which was barely an announcement of anything. The first one is The Gunk from Image and Form. This is the actual one true third-party exclusive for Xbox and PC, as all the other games we later found out are timed exclusives. I love Image and Form. They've never really done me wrong, and the gameplay kind of reminds me of some sort of cross between Luigi's Mansion and Super Mario Sunshine. So yeah, I'm very interested in checking that out. The second game is As Dusk Falls, which was the other kind of story-based game that they had during the stream. It's an interactive novel, and I just love the still shot rotoscope art. I don't even know if that's what you would call that, but that's what I'm calling it. It just looks absolutely stunning. And to your point, Charlotte, on the tell me why. I don't know if you saw this, but look, Don't Nod is going through a lot of precaution to make sure that people know that they're going to treat the subject matter right on it. Like if you go to their Q&A on the game, they have spoilers in it just to let you know of how they're going to properly handle the trans character in the game, which coming off of what we've been going through with Deadly Premonition 2 is probably the right move to make. And then finally, the game that I was most excited for coming out of the stream wasn't even part of the mainstream. It's Balan Wonderworld, and it looks like everything I look for in every type of game. A 3D platformer from Yuji Naka. This is going to sound weird, but I have this deep obsession with the game Nights into Dreams for the Sega Saturn, and I've never played it. Not at all. It sounds, it's sort of like how most Earthbound fans have never actually played Earthbound. I'm so smitten with this idea of the game that it's become this abstract concept of pure happiness to me. And when I look at Balan Wonderworld, I'm just seeing Nights into Dreams, and I can't wait to play it on whatever system I ultimately pick it up on, because we found out after the show that it's also coming to every other console. So, there'll be plenty of chances to play that. I think it looks great. Someone said that this game looks great for hipsters who have their heads up their own ass. So, I guess that's what I am now, but I can't wait to play that.
CJ?
Yeah.
You realize you can buy Nights into Dreams on Steam for me, it's €8. Like, you can play this game. Like,
I know, but I still have to download Boot Camp onto my Mac so I can start playing my Windows games.
I thought you were like, oh, it was a Saturn game originally, right? Like
it was a Saturn game, and then they re-released it on the PlayStation 2 with no upgrades, so it was the same game.
And you got to be real careful about meeting your heroes. Sometimes it's better to leave it as this wonderful moment of joy than actually playing it.
Better to live the hipster dream.
Yeah. I think if there's anything we've learned in 2020 with J.K. Rowling, it's you don't want to meet your heroes because you don't want to find out what they're really like.
It's funny, after all this E3 stuff, everything that's come out now, everybody's kind of shot their shot. No, that's not a phrase, but everybody showed what they had. The game I'm most excited for, just out of all of them, is that Stray. That kind of cyberpunk game where you're a cat. That was the one that I want that in my life forever.
That does look good. Yeah.
Just any game where I can play as a cat, I'm very happy.
And those games are few and far in between. I will say, based on the stream, it's kind of clear, and this was pointed out, I think, on Gamma Sutra or Business Insider, one of these websites, that we really now have three divergent paths forward for gaming. Like, you have Microsoft, because nothing Microsoft showed sold me on getting a Series X. If anything, it just sold me on subscribing to Games Pass and maybe getting a PC or getting an Xbox One S when those go on sale again, and just getting Games Pass, because I thought that's what that show was. It was just a great commercial for their subscription service. And so you have Microsoft that is kind of just putting all of its eggs into this Netflix type service with Games Pass. You have Nintendo that wants people to take their games with them wherever they go. And then you have Sony that's just sticking to the old ways of console generations. If I were Sony coming out of this presentation, I would be very confident walking into the next gen. And I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to go for a more expensive price on the PlayStation 5. Because I think coming out of this past 2 months, they still have the most hype compared to any of the other developers. But in the long run, I'm interested to see if Microsoft's gambit of kind of ignoring console generations and just going for the subscription service as its main course will pay off.
Yeah, I think they're kind of thinking the long game with this. And that the Games Pass, because universally, in every comment thread I've read about Xbox and all that, universally the Games Pass is loved, and everyone is like, this is great. I think, maybe they're angling for that to be the way of the future. And frankly, I'm all for that. That sounds amazing to me. I have a GameFly subscription, as everyone in Destructoid comments know, because I mention it all the time. It's how I play like 80% of the games I play. But if there was a digital version of that thing, fuck yeah, that's awesome. That would be so much more convenient and easier, and I would be happily jump to that if it really became a viable way to play the games I wanted to play. So yeah. Also, the Xbox, the naming thing, like, y'all just stop that shit. That is so confusing. And I know about games, and I'm confused by it.
It's going to be really more confusing when they introduce the Xbox Series S, which is allegedly the digital-only, slightly less powerful version, because then it's just going to be like, there's so many different series, and there's the one, and there's, God, just make it simple.
Yeah, just PS5. That's what you got to do. Make it simple keep it simple, stupid.
Real quick, our second story today is about Nintendo. Early last week, the company hosted a mini direct that focused on third-party titles. And as a thank you, somebody leaked a decade's worth of assets and source materials on its games. It is unclear where all the leaks are coming from, but there was a hack of the company that made the China exclusive IQ earlier this year. That might be the latest source, the source of the latest dump. We have seen so much come out of this in the past 2 days, from original versions of Yoshi to missing enemies from The Legend of Zelda to source codes for Star Fox, Mario Kart, and A Link to the Past. There are also internal emails, but you really hate to see those get out. I found this fascinating, of just one, that Nintendo has bothered to hold on to all of this stuff for so long. And two, just that you can kind of see why they didn't go with the designs that are now leaking out. I know a lot of people are looking at some of the Pokemon designs that they had ended up cutting. They're like, oh, you got to add this, you got to add this. But really, a lot of these designs, especially the early Yoshis, are bad. Like bad concepts, bad execution. And if I were an artist, I kind of wouldn't want my bad stuff getting out there. It's like when Sony raided Michael Jackson's catalog of unreleased tracks, and then they put them on an album, and then you listen to them and thought, oh, there's a good reason why Michael Jackson didn't release these songs. They're bad.
It's really funny to see how the sausage is made from a design point of view. I think it's fascinating. And I kind of, as the idea of like a digital archiving, I think it's great this stuff is still around. Yeah. One of my favorite things in my art books when I buy them is seeing the kind of preliminary drawings for characters and designs. The BioShock art books are really good for that. I have the Mega Man collections are really good for that too, looking at early robot designs and but reading the designers' thoughts on like what worked, what didn't, and sometimes they're just like, yeah, this was shit. I'm glad we didn't use it. But it's a fascinating process to see, because I think for a lot of us, we think, oh, okay, well, there's Yoshi, and someone drew Yoshi, and that's been Yoshi forever. But the reality is, there's many iterations and many kind of design concepts, stuff that works, stuff that doesn't.
I would love to see if there's like original versions of the Dragon Quest slime, because that's just the most simple enemy design there is. I wonder if he too has like these weird, awful early Yoshi-esque versions of the slime.
Yeah, it's just him with like just 15 dicks coming out of the thing. Just like, well, that's weird.
Spider eyes, just hundreds of them looking at you.
God, yeah.
I don't want to like be too much of a buzzkill, but my sort of reaction when I read about it was a little bit different. Like I really sympathize with people who are saying that this is actually pretty I understand why people are interested. Don't get me wrong, I'm not condemning people who are interested, but if you imagine, like I've worked in sort of areas, like I've been a proofreader, for example, and a translator, and often the first versions of something are really bad, and like you have backwards and forwards conversations like in your department about how to do stuff, because the whole point is drafts are, a snapshot in time, but they're not the final work, and that somebody's work that they were sort of trying stuff out with could just get released, and then now it's open to criticism of, oh, you should have done this or you should have done that. That's a huge amount of pressure to put on games designers, that having this material scrutinized, even though I know it's like a decade on, like some of these people are still working in the industry, and to have like their decisions back in the day questioned. It must be extremely stressful. And it's like, can you imagine having work files that you're like working on at the moment leaked when you know it's not the final version? It's like, I'm not even talking about, some of the leaks. I'm seeing that apparently there was some sort of dubious stuff in some of the leaks, like sort of inside jokes that have sort of aged pretty poorly. But even taking that out of consideration, having somebody read something that's is not good and you never wanted people to see, it's kind of embarrassing. It's kind of humiliating in a way. So I can see exactly why people are interested. I'm not blaming people for that, but also I can understand why people are pretty upset. And also it's like, in a lot of companies, stuff from years ago is not deleted when people leave the company. The system admin just transfers it somewhere else and keeps it under lock and key in case it's needed at a later date. And I don't see this as any different. It's kind of a shame that there's been some sort of, administrative leak, some sort of, it's serious what happened, No,
it absolutely is. I 100% agree with everything that you just said. And that, my fascination with some of the stuff that has come out is going to die off quickly when, you think of the ramifications that are going to come from a massive leak of this size. I've seen some people on Twitter talking about, development studios now having to shore up not only their internal protection systems to keep people from outside the company from accessing their materials, but also people within the company making sure that possibly going above and beyond to make sure that they don't even possibly consider maybe sometimes accidentally leaking something or something to that effect. And so, a leak of this type may have a negative effect on the working life of current developers right now. And you are right on the idea of developers in the past who are now having their work scrutinized. I can imagine it would be stressful on the artists from the past who designed like these old Pokemon that they decided not to put in the final game, and now you have everyone online complaining, why didn't this one make it in? Why isn't he in? So
oh god, Pokemon is the worst for that, because you remember the whole national dex thing.
Yeah.
Like, just to add a little point to when you sort of recapped what I said, it could be that extreme case would be that continued leaks would endanger certain types of jobs in the game industry. Like, people will stop working with freelance translators, for example, because they'll be so scared of their stuff getting leaked that they won't want to take anybody from outside of the company. I've gathered, I think that's already, well, I imagine already some companies won't work with freelancers. But it could be that if it becomes sort of a plague and like all enough producers become scared of working with freelancers, then, these freelancers will either have to adapt to not work in games anymore, do something else instead. I don't know, boring stuff like technical translation, or they'll just not, translators is an example I know of, and freelance translation is extremely endangered at the moment. There's a lot of different factors such as machine translation and all that sort of stuff that making it a very hard job to do and get paid for properly. So, this is just another thing where it could be that if there's leaks, then people don't want to work with freelancers anymore, and that's very unfortunate.
I didn't even think of that. Wow, that's a very good perspective on this.
It's wonderful points all around. The idea of like, so I'll look at an art book, and I know I go back to art books, but that's kind of where my brain goes with a lot of this stuff. And I'll say, oh, that would have been a cool design, or that's fun, but if someone on Twitter, some social media, is going to reach out to that artist and say, why isn't this in the game? And fuck those people. That's ridiculous. That is utterly, hey Kat, that is utterly ridiculous. It's a really fun kind of water cooler conversation to go, hey, that would have been neat, or did you see this? That's kind of fun to look at, or play what if. But to like, that's harassment. Like, to bother these artists who, especially if this stuff is 10, 15 years old, it's, come on. That's awful. And maybe that's just people sometimes, but it's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah. So that makes one big leak for Sony this year, one big leak for Nintendo this year. Wonder if Microsoft's going to be next.
This is is Podtoid.
We are just about out of time for the show, but before we go, Occams, do we have a community shout out this week?
Yeah, we got a couple. Community user Hypno turned 23. Ripe old age of 23. That's a good age to be. A very, very special shout out to user Death Eagle, who recently quit meth. And this, at the time he posted, it was 11 days. I hope you're doing well, buddy. I'm very proud of you. And yeah, so that's awesome. That's really awesome. And finally, a shout out, Jetter Mars. That's got to be like a robot thing, I guess. And Meanderbot, my near and dear artist buddy Meanderbot. They kind of had a leather jacket off in the quick posts. And y'all some handsome motherfuckers. It was awesome to see. I love seeing community members, and y'all both, you wore it well, guys. Good for y'all. And so some great community shout outs this week.
I just want to say to the community member who announced that they are 11 days sober from meth, really good job. As a member of the gay community, that is I don't know if this person is or not, but I've seen a lot of what meth can do to people. I had a roommate once who smoked nightly, and it slowly ruined his singing voice, which is what he wanted to do for a living. So really congratulations on that. I know it can be tough. I had another associate when I lived down in West Hollywood who I don't know how I found this, but I think I searched his name and it came up for this Amazon review of a book about how to get off meth. And it was just this 4 paragraphs of impassioned praise for this book because it helped save his life. So it is possible. You can do it. You have our support. But I'm glad you're doing that. So even if I don't know you, I'm glad you are, because I've seen what it can do to people. So that is it for this episode of Podtoid. On behalf of Charlotte, Occams, and myself, thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Podbean, or the Destructoid YouTube channel.